Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I stood in front of the mirror, my hair a tangled mess from the long day I'd had. The soft hum of the air conditioner filled the quiet room, and for a moment, it felt peaceful, like the calm before a storm. I reached up to fix a loose strand, but before I could even touch it, I saw his reflection move behind me. He didn't say a word. Just the sound of slow footsteps coming closer. My breath hitched as I felt his presence, warm, heavy, familiar. His hand slid gently around my waist, fingers brushing against the fabric of my shirt, sending an unexpected rush through me. I froze, half confused, half drawn into the moment. His touch wasn't forceful, just deliberate, as if he already knew the effect it would have on me. "Don't move," he whispered softly, his voice low enough to make the room feel smaller. I could see his eyes in the mirror, focused, unreadable, yet full of something I couldn't name. The space between us disappeared in seconds, and for the first time that day, I forgot what I was doing, forgot everything except how close he was. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with the warmth of his breath on my skin. My heart was pounding too loud to ignore. I didn't know if I should turn around or stay still. It was that strange mix of comfort and uncertainty, the kind that makes you question what happens next. Then, without warning, he leaned closer and his lips brushed my shoulder. It wasn't a kiss, more like a test. A question without words. When I gasped softly, he stopped for a second, as if waiting for permission that neither of us said aloud. The air between us changed, charged, complicated, real. And just when I thought I'd finally speak, he stepped back. No explanation. No smile. Just that lingering tension that stayed in the mirror long after he walked away. Was it a mistake? A moment of weakness? Or was it something both of us had been quietly building toward for weeks without realizing it? I kept staring at the reflection, still feeling the warmth on my skin where his hand had been. That moment replayed in my mind again and again, and the silence in the room suddenly felt too loud. What did that touch mean? Was it just curiosity, or something deeper neither of us was ready to face? Tell me, if someone you trusted crossed that invisible line between friendship and something more, what would you do? Would you stop them, or let the moment unfold to see where it leads? Comment below what you think happened next. Should I have turned around when he held me? Or should I have stepped away? After he walked away, I stood frozen, staring at my reflection like it could explain what had just happened. My fingers brushed the side of my neck, still feeling the ghost of his touch. The room was quiet again, but everything inside me was loud, my heartbeat, my thoughts, the confusion I couldn't put into words. He wasn't just anyone. He'd been around for months, close enough to know me, to understand when something was wrong, but distant enough that I never really figured him out. He was my best friend's older brother, the kind of person who carried calm in his silence and warmth in his presence. We'd always shared small moments, simple conversations over coffee, late-night talks about everything and nothing, laughter that came too easily. But never like this. That night, I tried to distract myself with small things, folding clothes, answering messages, pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. The mirror scene kept replaying in my head. The way his eyes looked at me wasn't friendly, it was different. It was like he'd been holding something back for too long and it finally slipped through. The next morning, I saw him again in the kitchen. Sunlight filled the room, but somehow it made the tension feel sharper, like every unspoken word was floating in the air between us. He was making coffee, calm as ever, acting as if nothing had happened. I hesitated in the doorway, wondering if I should say something, but my voice didn't come. He turned, caught my eye, and gave a small smile. "Morning," he said, his tone light, but his gaze lingered a second too long. "Morning," I replied, pretending to focus on the mug I was holding. My hands trembled slightly, though I hoped he didn't notice. We talked about simple things, work, the weather, errands, but underneath, there was that quiet awareness neither of us could ignore. Every pause felt charged. Every glance carried more than words could. Later that day, he offered to drive me to the store. The air inside the car felt thick with everything unsaid. The radio played softly, and every now and then, our hands brushed when we reached for something. Each time it happened, my chest tightened, and I could feel his hesitation too, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should. When we stopped at a red light, he finally spoke. About last night, his voice was careful, uncertain. I turned toward him, heart pounding, waiting for him to finish, but he didn't. The light turned green, and he just drove on, the rest of his sentence hanging in the air like unfinished music. That moment told me everything and nothing at once. There was something between us, something neither of us could deny. But neither of us was ready to admit it. Not yet. The days that followed felt like walking on a thin line between comfort and confusion. We still saw each other almost every day, but something had changed quietly between us. It wasn't obvious to anyone else, but to me, it was impossible to ignore. Every small glance, every pause in conversation, it all carried weight now. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he said my name. But neither of us talked about that night. It stayed unspoken, hidden beneath normal routines. The strange part was, the more we tried to act normal, the more it didn't feel normal at all. I found myself wondering what he was thinking when our eyes met, whether he regretted what happened, or wanted it to happen again. One afternoon, my best friend invited a small group of us over for dinner. He was there too, of course, sitting across from me at the table. Laughter filled the room, but under it, I could feel his quiet gaze every now and then. When our eyes met across the table, the noise around us faded for just a moment. It was like we were caught in some kind of silent conversation no one else could hear. Later that night, when everyone was gone and I stayed behind to help clean up, he walked into the kitchen. The sound of the faucet running filled the silence until he spoke softly, "You've been avoiding me." I turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. He took a slow step closer, his voice calm but uncertain. "Then why do you look away every time I try to talk?" I didn't have an answer. How do you explain something you don't fully understand yourself? I wanted to say I didn't want to ruin anything, that things were already complicated. But before I could say anything, his phone buzzed on the counter. A woman's name flashed on the screen, and for some reason, my chest tightened. He glanced at it quickly, then turned it face down. "It's no one important," he said quietly. But it didn't sound convincing. The moment broke, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter, but inside, it did. It made me question everything I thought I knew about him, about us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The reflection in the mirror looked different again, more uncertain, more lost. I didn't know if I was falling into something real or just chasing a feeling that would leave me broken. The following week, everything felt heavier, our words, our silence, even the air between us. We hadn't talked since that night in the kitchen, and every time I saw him, he seemed a little more distant. Still, there was something in his eyes that gave him away. It wasn't anger or regret, it was conflict, like he was fighting something he couldn't quite say out loud. I tried to focus on work, on friends, on anything that would stop my mind from circling back to him. But it didn't help. Every small thing reminded me of him, the sound of his laughter echoing in the hallway, the way he used to hand me coffee in the mornings without asking how I liked it. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something deeper, something that scared me because it didn't make sense. One evening, I got a message from him, "Can we talk?" Just 4 words, but they made my heart race. I hesitated before replying, but curiosity won. We agreed to meet outside near the old park, the same place we used to sit and talk for hours before things got complicated. The night air was cool when I arrived. The faint glow of streetlights flickered across the empty benches. I saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain, like he'd been rehearsing what to say but still wasn't sure where to begin. "I didn't mean to make things awkward," he started, his tone quiet. That night, it wasn't planned. I know, I said softly. But pretending it didn't happen isn't helping either. He looked down, exhaling deeply. It's not that simple. Then make me understand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was racing. He looked up at me, eyes dark with something I couldn't read. There's someone I used to see, he admitted. It ended, but not cleanly. I didn't want you caught in that. The words stung more than I expected. So this, whatever's happening, was a mistake? He took a step closer, shaking his head. No. That's the problem. It didn't feel like one. For a second, neither of us moved. The wind picked up, brushing between us, carrying a silence that said more than words could. His hand almost reached for mine before he stopped himself. That hesitation, so small yet so telling, felt like the loudest moment of all. Somewhere in that pause, the truth hung heavy between us. It wasn't about timing or fear. It was about choosing what came next, and neither of us seemed ready to make that choice. So I turned away first, whispering, "Then what happens now?" He didn't answer. The sound of my footsteps faded, but I could still feel his eyes following me, and I knew, whatever was coming next, it wouldn't be simple. I thought walking away from him that night would bring some clarity, but it only made things worse. Every unanswered question clung to me like fog I couldn't escape. I tried convincing myself it was better this way, that stepping back would make everything simpler. But life rarely works like that. 2 days later, I saw him again by accident. It was at a small cafe near my office, the one I usually went to when I needed quiet. He was sitting by the window, a phone in hand, and across from him was the same woman whose name had flashed on his screen that night in the kitchen. She looked composed, confident, the kind of person who doesn't lose control easily. They weren't arguing, but something in the tension of their posture told me this wasn't just a casual meeting. I stood frozen near the entrance, my chest tight, unsure if I should turn back or walk and like it didn't matter. Before I could decide, he looked up. Our eyes met through the glass. For a moment, the noise of the cafe disappeared. His expression shifted, surprise, then guilt, then something softer that almost looked like apology. I didn't go inside. I just nodded faintly and walked away before he could follow. The sound of my heartbeat drowned out everything else. That image, the two of them together, stayed burned in my mind. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was the feeling of realizing you might not really know someone as well as you thought. Later that night, my phone buzzed with his message, "It's not what it looked like. Please, can we talk?" Part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity won again. We met in the same park where we'd last spoken, though this time, the air between us felt heavier. "She showed up without telling me," he said quickly, as if he'd been waiting to explain. "She wanted to talk about the past, about what went wrong. I didn't plan it." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. "Then why did it look like more than that?" "Because she still thinks there's something to fix," he admitted. "But I don't. I'm trying to move on." He paused, eyes searching mine. "With you." That confession should have felt like relief, but instead it made everything more complicated. "You say that," I whispered, "but you're still tangled in something you haven't let go of." He didn't deny it. "I know. But I'm trying." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city lights flickered through the trees, casting shifting shadows between us. I could see he meant what he said, but meaning something and doing something about it were two different things. Then, before I could respond, his phone rang again. The same name flashed across the screen. He looked at it, then at me. "I have to take this," he said quietly. I turned away before he could explain further. "Maybe you should," I replied, my voice breaking slightly. As I walked off, his voice called after me, but I didn't stop this time. The sound faded behind me, leaving only questions I didn't want answers to. Still, one thought kept circling my mind. What if the woman from his past wasn't just an ex trying to rekindle something, what if she was the reason he could never truly move forward? For days after that night, I tried to move on. I stopped checking my phone, stopped replaying every conversation in my head. But silence has a strange way of making you think even louder. I kept wondering what that phone call was about, who she really was, and why he still seemed caught between two worlds, his past and whatever we were trying to be. Then one evening, as I was leaving work, I saw him waiting outside. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. The city lights cast faint shadows under his eyes. For a moment, I wanted to turn away, but something about the look on his face stopped me. "We need to talk," he said softly. "Please. Just listen this time." I nodded, wordlessly following him to a quiet corner of the park. The same one where every turning point between us seemed to happen. He took a deep breath before speaking. "That call that night, it wasn't just about her. She's been struggling, and she reached out because she didn't have anyone else. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to pull you into something messy." I stayed quiet, letting his words sink in. "So you've been helping her?" "Yes," he said. "But not because I still love her. Because I needed closure. And I wanted to start with honesty, with you." For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. The wall I'd built between us started to crack. I wanted to believe him, because his voice sounded real, steady, and tired of running from the truth. "But why didn't you just tell me from the start?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Because I didn't want you to see me as someone still stuck in the past. But I guess you had to see who I really am." The air felt lighter, though something about his expression made me uneasy. He stepped closer, gently taking my hand. "I'm done hiding," he said. "If you can forgive me, I want to start over." Before I could respond, a voice called out from behind us, a woman's voice. I turned and saw her, the same woman from the cafe, standing a few feet away. She looked calm, but her eyes told a different story. "I told you it wasn't over," she said, her gaze fixed on him. "You can't just walk away after what happened." I froze, confusion rushing through me. "What is she talking about?" I asked. He went pale, eyes darting between us. "It's not what you think," he whispered, but his voice trembled this time. The woman stepped closer, holding up a small folded paper. "Maybe she deserves to know everything," she said quietly. When she handed him that folded paper, time felt like it froze. His face drained of color, his lips parted slightly, but no words came. I stared at him, my heart pounding, waiting for an explanation that didn't come fast enough. Finally, I reached out and took the paper from her hand. Inside was a letter, his signature at the bottom, dated months before we ever met. It was a signed statement, promising to help her financially after their breakup, something that looked like an agreement made out of guilt, not love. The woman looked at me quietly, her voice softer now. "He didn't cheat," she said. "He just couldn't tell you that he still felt responsible for the mess I was in." For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I looked at him, his eyes filled with relief and regret all at once. "I should have been honest from the start," he said quietly. "I was scared you'd walk away before I had a chance to explain." I folded the paper and handed it back. "You didn't need to hide the truth," I said. "You just needed to trust me with it." He nodded, the weight between us finally breaking. For the first time, there were no secrets left, no half-truths, no unspoken feelings. Just two people standing in the quiet, learning how to start again. The woman gave a small nod, turned, and walked away, leaving us in the stillness of the park. We stood there for a while, not saying much. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need big words, it just needs silence, and the courage to stay when it's easier to leave. When I finally walked away that night, I didn't know what our future would be. But for the first time, it didn't feel uncertain, it felt real. Imperfect, complicated, but real. Tell me, would you have forgiven him if you were in my place? Comment below if you think this story deserves a sequel. because something tells me their story isn't truly over.